I feel like this song is going to haunt people now. Because I keep playing it like over and over again from the beginning, at the beginning of every stream. Hello! Hi! It's been a few days? It's been a couple days. I watched MCC earlier. I really thought that Cyan could make it to Dodge Bolt until the end of Sands of Time. I was like, yeah, no, they're not. They're not. But hey, at least they didn't. At least Rambo didn't get third place again. But enough about that. Today, we're gonna be reading chapter 5 of Nocturnal Animals. I wanted to get another stream in because I won't be able to stream tomorrow because of work. So, schedule for this upcoming week, in terms of days I won't be able to stream, I will not be able to stream tomorrow, Tuesday, Friday, or Sunday. So, and who knows if I'm gonna have the energy to stream on the other days. We'll see. I'm definitely gonna stream sometime this week. I'm not just gonna dip off the face of the earth. Although, if you want to see more consistent content from me, you can follow me on TikTok. No, I don't really post on there that often either. But definitely, I don't know. But, Rambu and Demiku Golden... Excuse me? What was that last bit? They what? I know it wasn't in, like, real life. But they what? One second. While I wait for a stream delay to catch up, I'm gonna go fill my water. They did. I can send you the clip. Like, I'm guessing this is in game, so I need to watch the VODs. Maybe not like the full VODs. I never really watch full MCC VODs. Don't really have the attention span for that, gonna be real. But yeah, coming, like, at the beginning of today, and for a while I was like, okay, Rambu is either going to be Perry the Platypus or Hatsune Miku. I didn't think he would actually do Hatsune Miku until he did some more close-up photos of his costume. And I was like, and I saw a post being like, wait, it kind of looks like that one portion of Hatsune Miku's dress. And I was like, okay, maybe. But there is also a possibility that it could be Perry the Platypus. And he started his stream with Perry the Platypus, and I was like, okay. Interesting choice of onesie. Bit too big for him, or a bit too small for him. But, okay. And then he did that cool transition thing into Hatsune Miku. Like, what? I was in shock. Like, how did he do that? Yes, it's in Minecraft. I figured as much, considering the fact that Purple lives in America and Tommy lives in the UK. Alright. I swear that's enough talking about MCC from me. We should get on to the rest of the stream. But, if any of you guys are new here, if you want to follow, be sure to drop a follow, because, I also play Minecraft on occasion, but I have been on this kick of, like, is that even the word, of reading fan fiction, because I really enjoy reading and I really love giving voices to the characters. Granted, these ones already have voices and accents, so it's not that hard to... It's hard to emulate it, but it's not hard to think of it, if you know what I mean. And if you want to follow me on my other socials, click exclamation, or type in exclamation mark socials, and my link tree should pop up with all my socials on it. If you guys want to follow me on other platforms. Alrighty. Let's get started, shall we? I remembered to turn off my starting soon scene first this time. Let's see if I have any lag. Still have a little bit of lag, but that's fine. That's fine. Alright. Nocturnal Animals is by Bones and the Bees, the author of Tommy and Its Clinic for Supervillains, the fan fiction that is home to the character Siren that you might be familiar with on Twitter. So, and Bones and the Bees is a really good writer, so I've decided to read some more of their stuff, because it's just really cool and really well written. Alright. Chapter 5. The Problem with Compassion. Summary. With a vampire roommate, it's a little difficult not to feel conflicted with your job as a vampire hunter. Trigger warnings, murder in the vampire hunting style, and, you know, blood like usual. Somehow, despite the fact that Tommy was now in the unthinkable situation of having a vampire for a roommate, things quickly felt normal? It was awkward at first, learning how to dance around each other without the promise of eventually parting ways. Tommy made room in his closet for Wilbur to put his first pair of clothes. Wilbur set up a more permanent blanket and pillow setup on the couch for the few times he slept. And Tommy had to figure out where he was going to keep Wilbur's wine. One second. Sorry about that, chat. My brother came into the room and had me come downstairs to do something for a few minutes. Let's get back on to the story. Alright, where was I? Things had to be readjusted, some furniture was moved, and Tommy carved out a space in his life for Wilbur. Surprisingly, he didn't mind it in the slightest. It felt like something cavernous and empty was getting filled up a little more with each passing day. Every time he found Wilbur poring over his potion-making books, or realized Wilbur had done the dishes while he was at his shift again, or was woken by the sound of footsteps outside his bedroom door and didn't immediately assume there was an intruder in his house, each of these instances filled up the emptiness just a little bit more. As Wilbur got more comfortable staying with Tommy, he dove deeper into his search to learn about sigils and potions. At one point, he asked if he could borrow Tommy's library card, and Tommy woke up in the late afternoon to find piles of books scattered around the vampire. At night, when Tommy was exhausted from his shift but wasn't ready to sleep yet, they'd watch movies together on Tommy's shitty laptop. Wilbur had missed out on all the new Netflix shows that had come out in the past year, so Tommy was helping him catch up, which would have been enjoyable if Wilbur wasn't an absolute prick to watch movies with. The man hated Marvel movies, even Spider-Man. How did someone hate Spider-Man? But despite Wilbur having shit taste, Tommy found himself enjoying the quips they would share whenever they watched some random movie or another together. He liked hearing Wilbur's surprised laugh when a joke landed, because it always made him start laughing as well. Sometimes, Tommy caught Wilbur humming tunes under his breath. This wasn't new, but what was new was the way he'd sometimes sing actual words to songs Tommy didn't recognize. It was never loud enough to actually get a solid grasp on the tune, and Wilbur probably didn't realize that Tommy could hear it, but it made Tommy even more curious about his past as a musician. One day, when he was walking back from his shift, he passed by a thrift store that apparently had decided to do a 24-hour fire sale. While Tommy didn't exactly need anything from a thrift shop, when he spotted a worn-down guitar in the window, he found himself stepping inside without thinking twice. The guitar was heavy, and he grunted as he lugged it back to the apartment. It didn't even come with a case, but it had been dirt cheap compared to what most guitars sold for, and since it might get thrown out the window depending on how Wilbur reacted, Tommy figured it was a solid price. Fucking shit, Tommy muttered as he fought with the keys while shoving the guitar strap to the side to get it out of the way. Piece of shit. You better be a damn good guitar for all this trouble. He unlocked the door and swung it open, stepping inside to see Wilbur sitting right on the couch. He had a glass of wine sitting on the coffee table, while his nose was buried in a book larger than Tommy's head, his fingers tracing the words as he scanned the page with a hunger that was even more intimidating than a thirsty vampire. As soon as the door clicked shut behind Tommy, though, he glanced up. "Hey, Tommy, how was..." Wilbur cut himself off when his eyes landed on the guitar. There was a beat of silence as he blinked at the instrument, before his eyes began to jump between the guitar and Tommy's face with something like confusion twisting his lips. What is that?" Tommy huffed, shoving down the anxiety in his chest as he lifted the guitar strap over his head. "It's a harmonica," he deadpanned. "What the hell do you think it is, dipshit?" Wilbur blinked, slowly setting the book down next to him on the couch. "Why do you have a guitar?" he asked carefully. "I saw it in a thrift shop and figured he might get some use out of it." Tommy shrugged, hoping the flush on his face wasn't obvious. There was a pause as Wilbur's brows furrowed. I... You know I don't play music anymore. Tommy raised an eyebrow. Does it mean you can't pick up again? He still didn't understand Wilbur's whole bit about not being the same person he was before. About not wanting to sing because that was something he did in his human life but couldn't do it now. Clearly it was something he enjoyed, considering Tommy heard him singing without thinking all the damn time. So it didn't make sense why he wouldn't just let himself actually do it for real. If you don't want it, I can toss it in the dumpster. No! Wilbur exclaimed, jumping to his feet. Tommy blinked, and Wilbur's eyes widened as he realized what he'd done. He shrunk back into the couch with obvious embarrassment, and Tommy tried not to grin as he walked across the living room, holding the guitar out to him. Wilbur stared at the guitar like it was personally offending him. Even still, after a few tense seconds, he reached out and took the guitar from Tommy's waiting hands, cradling it to his chest like it was something precious. As Wilbur readjusted the guitar in his lap, Tommy settled himself on the cushion next to him, bringing his knees up to his chest and watching him with bated breath as he began to fiddle with the tuning knobs. He did a few practice strums, wincing when it came out sounding almost horribly out of tune, and went back to adjusting it. It was obvious Wilbur was more familiar with the guitar. His fingers twisted the knobs with practiced ease, hands fluttering over the strings like he'd been waiting this entire time to touch a guitar again. He did a few more practice strums, each one better than the last, and after what felt like ages, he finally gave the guitar a small smile. "It's amazing," he said softly. "You should play me something as a thank you," Tommy replied, flashing him a wide grin. Wilbur rolled his eyes. "I won't sing, but I guess I can play you something short." Although disappointment flared inside of Tommy at that, he still bounced a bit in his seat as Wilbur began to strum the chords of a song he'd heard on the radio before. It was really good playing, and even though Wilbur wasn't singing, he was mouthing along to the words all the same. It was the lightest Wilbur had looked since Tommy met him. Like, for just a brief moment, there was no insurmountable weight on his shoulders, nothing dragging him down deep into the earth. For once, Wilbur seemed relaxed, fully and utterly relaxed. That was the moment Tommy decided that, yeah, this was a great purchase. Over the next few weeks, the guitar got used far more than anything Tommy had been expecting. He would come home from his shifts to find Wilbur strumming away with different tunes, sometimes scribbling things into a small notebook that he'd never let Tommy see. Even though he never sang, Tommy had a feeling he was writing song lyrics, and waited for the day that Wilbur would actually sing them. One day, Tommy noticed a series of runes carved into the base of the guitar that certainly hadn't been there when he bought them. It was then he noticed more runes carved into his microwave, his refrigerator, even underneath his sink. The lines were a bit shaky, but Tommy had vague enough knowledge of runes to recognize the ones on his appliances as unbreaking runes, and figured the ones on the guitar were something similar. The realization made him smile. Wilbur never said anything about the runes, but it was obvious he was the one who carved them. Sometimes, Tommy would find crumpled up pieces of paper covered in sketches of runes and sigils, and wondered if Wilbur was just trying to learn how to enchant things, or if there was a specific effect he wanted to create. So overall, things with Wilbur were going well. Really well. Tommy no longer dreaded coming home to an empty apartment, because he knew Wilbur would be there with notebook pages scattered around, strumming some new tune that would always get stuck in Tommy's head for the rest of the night. Of course, there was still the issue of Wilbur being a vampire. This wasn't necessarily an issue because Tommy minded it. If anything, he still had to remind Wilbur to drink more often than not, because the dumbass still tried to drink as little of his wine as possible, insisting that he didn't need more, even though Nikki had told Tommy on their second visit to the bakery that Wilbur should have finished his first bottle way earlier than he did. So Tommy would bicker with him to get him to drink more, because it's not like anyone got hurt for that blood, and Tommy didn't want the idiot to make himself sick. If anything, the vampire issue wasn't Wilbur's fault at all, or even directly related to him. Instead, the issue Tommy began to encounter was how his friendship with Wilbur was beginning to affect his work. It was getting more and more difficult for Tommy to do his job as a vampire hunter. Before, he could kill a vampire and not think twice about it. They were monsters that hurt innocent people. That's what he'd been taught, so killing them wasn't something he'd felt a lot of remorse about. But now when he found himself cornering lone vampires during his patrols, his mind would always flash to Wilbur. Wilbur's desperation not to hurt anyone. The hatred he had for the thing he'd been forced to become. How human he acted. Tommy began to see the same slivers of humanity in other vampires. The fear on their faces when he held his blade against their throats. The small whimpers they'd make, realizing they were about to die. How even when their eyes were swirling with shades of red or gold or silver, there was still something undeniably human in them. Wilbur was supposed to be the exception, not the rule. But it was as if a switch had been flipped, and Tommy now saw all vampires in a different light than he had before. This wasn't something he could let the hunters see. If they realized he was hesitating with his duties, they'd want to know why. And Tommy couldn't exactly tell them he had a vampire roommate now, could he? Of course, though, one night, this growing sympathy for the vampires he hunted was noticed. Unlike most nights where he was alone on his patrols, a group of senior hunters had been sent out due to a report about a possible coven hiding downtown. Tonight, Tommy was with Dream, Hannah, and George, and they were in the middle of a fight. Tommy ducked as the vampire he was fighting swiped at him. When he straightened up, the vampire lunged at him again, and Tommy brought his arms up just in time to shield his neck as the creature bared his teeth at him. This vampire was strong, an older vampire who clearly fed on a regular basis. Tommy stumbled back as the vampire pushed forward, pinning him to the wall and forcing his hands against his chest. "You fucking hunters always sticking your nose where you shouldn't," the vampire hissed, glaring at him. "We weren't bothering anyone!" Before Tommy could respond, a silver blade gleaming with dark blood emerged from the vampire's chest. The grip the creature had on Tommy immediately loosened, his face going blank as he fell backwards to the ground. Dream stood behind the vampire, yanking his knife out of his chest with a loud squelch and wiping it off on his pants. "You okay?" Dream asked, lifting Tommy's chin with his free hand and checking his neck. "I'm good." Tommy nodded, taking a breath to steady himself as he stepped away from the wall. Behind Dream, Hannah and George had already dispatched the vampires they were fighting. Hannah's face was smeared with blood that wasn't hers, while George was twirling his knife in his hand, whistling a jaunty tune. On the ground, several corpses were dripping blood onto the concrete, and Tommy had to shove down a wave of nausea at the sight. "I think that's all of them," George said, eyeing the vampire Dream had just killed. "Is anyone hurt?" Dream asked, glancing between Hannah and George. Both of them shook their heads, and Dream nodded in approval. "Good. Then we can probably get back to the academy." In the darkness of the alley behind Dream, Tommy noticed a flash of movement. Acting on instinct, He ran for the blur, and felt himself connect with a solid body. In a mess of tangled limbs and yelling, next thing Tommy knew, he was pinning a girl to the ground. I'm sorry, I just wanted to leave. The girl was stammering, but Tommy barely heard any of it. All he could focus on was how young she looked. She didn't look any older than 14, but could have been younger for all he knew. Of course, though, her swirling red eyes told him that she could very well be much older than that. But she wasn't acting like an older vampire right then. And judging by how her weak attempts to get out from under him were, she hadn't fed in a while either. Holy shit! Good job noticing that one, Tommy! Hannah complimented, standing above him. Must have been one of the coven members we missed. Dream murmured behind him. Take care of it quickly. I want to get back to the academy. They wanted Tommy to kill her. To kill this girl. Of course they did. She was a vampire. He was supposed to kill her. But he felt frozen as he stared at her. Something solid lodging itself in his throat when he noticed tears streaming down her cheeks and into her hair. I wasn't going to hurt anyone, she cried. The vampire you killed, he was my sire, but I didn't want to hurt people. It was eerily similar to what Wilbur had told him that fateful night they had met in the alleyway. Another sob bubbled up from her throat. I don't want to die, she whispered, squeezing her eyes shut. Now that wasn't similar to Wilbur, because Wilbur had wanted to die, but this girl did not. This girl who looked younger than Tommy, who didn't sound like she didn't have a choice becoming what she was, who was begging for mercy from someone who wasn't supposed to feel anything close to sympathy for her kind. Tommy! Dream's voice jolted Tommy out of his thoughts. Acting punk. Thanks. My very little time spent in theater paid off. Are you going to finish the job or not? The girl let out another cry. Please, I won't hurt anyone. Tommy couldn't breathe. His chest was impossibly tight, and the dagger in his hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He was frozen, staring in horror at this vampire, a girl who just wanted to live. How long ago were you turned? He whispered. She sniffed. A few months ago. And how many people have you killed? Dream cut in, glaring at the girl. She shrunk back under the weight of Dream's blank stare. I didn't want to hurt them, but my sire made me, she admitted in a whisper. I swear I didn't want to. The guilt, the pain, the fear, it was saturating every word she spoke. She wasn't lying. Tommy could tell. You didn't want to, but you still killed people, Dream huffed. You're a murderer, and murderers like you don't get a chance to repent after the fact. Dream! Tommy exclaimed, scowling at him. Is there a problem, Tommy? Dream challenged, bending down so he was eye to eye with him. Do we have to kill her? Tommy whispered, his throat closing in on itself. What if we brought her back to the academy? George snorted at that. You fucking crazy? You think we're just taking in strays now or something? No, he doesn't. Tommy knows better than that, Dream said, leaning so close to Tommy's face, their foreheads were almost touching. Right, Tommy? You know what your job is. correct? Tommy gulped. The veiled threat in Dream's voice was obvious. He had to kill her, or else they would all know something was up. He couldn't let anyone realize that he was sympathetic to vampires now, because if they did, they would want to know why. And if the Academy found out about Wilbur, then Wilbur's life could be at risk. He had to kill the girl. Tommy didn't have a choice. Yes, I know what my job is. Tommy forced out through clenched teeth. Dream hummed. Then get on with it. Taking a shaky breath, Tommy turned back to look at the girl. She was still crying, but it was no longer with the same desperation as before. She knew what her fate was, and had resigned herself to it. The tears were not ones of fear, but instead ones of mourning. Mourning herself. I'll make it quick, Tommy whispered, so low that he knew only she would be able to hear it with her enhanced senses. Squeezing her eyes shut, she nodded. As if he was a wooden doll, Tommy puppeted his arm to lift the dagger to her throat. With the weight of Dream, George, and Hannah's stares on his back, Tommy did what he had to do. The entire walk back to the academy, Tommy didn't hear a single word any of the other hunters said to him. His head was buzzing as the girl's face kept flashing in his mind, her pleas ringing over and over again in his ears. After dropping off his dagger, all he wanted to do was get the hell out of the academy and back to his apartment. But of course, the universe couldn't give him a break, because Dream cornered him before he could leave. So what the hell was that? Dream asked, blocking the supply room door so Tommy couldn't walk out. Clenching his jaw, Tommy refused to meet the beady eyes of Dream's mask. What the hell was what? He asked, wincing at how hoarse he sounded. You know what I mean. Taking a step forward, Dream reached out to grab his shoulder, and Tommy fought the urge to wince at the gesture. You didn't want to kill that vampire. Why? Fuck. Tommy really didn't want to get into this right now when he was already on the verge of tears. She was a kid, he forced out. She was probably lying, Dream told him. I know she looked young, but she was probably decades if not centuries older than you. You don't know that, Tommy snapped, narrowing his eyes. She was weak, like a fledgling would be. Probably just hadn't fed in a while. Or she was only turned a few months ago. Tommy shot back. Dream paused, cocking his head to the side as he stared Tommy down. Tommy fought not to shrink under his gaze, not wanting to let something like this go so easily. What does it matter if she was young? She was a monster. You were saving her from an eternity of hurting others. Dream pointed out. Saving her. Wilbur had wanted Tommy to do that to him. He had wanted Tommy to save him from the eternal torment of what he was. And maybe a part of him resented Tommy for that. He wasn't sure. But Wilbur was also making music again, and that had to count for something, right? She didn't want to hurt others, Tommy argued. It's not like she had a choice, though. There's no way for her to survive without blood. Tommy bit back the urge to say something about blood dealers, about Nikki's bakery, and how no one was hurt from the blood she provided. He couldn't tell Dream about Nikki, but he could make a similar point. But Sapnap drinks blood that he doesn't have to hurt anyone to get, Tommy pointed out. Immediately, Dream stiffened at this. Sapnap's a hunter. It's different. How is it different? Tommy challenged. because he's your friend? You can't say it's because he didn't choose to be a vampire, because that girl didn't either. It's different because Sapnap works to prevent what happened to him from happening to others. It's different because we know we can trust him not to kill innocents. That thing admitted to murdering people, Tommy! She didn't want to! Don't you get that? That doesn't change anything! Once a murderer, always a murderer, Dream hissed. Aren't we all murderers, though? We've all killed dozens of vampires. Why the fuck are we not considered murderers, but they are? Because the bloodsuckers aren't human, Tommy. So if you stabbed Sapnap in the fucking chest, it would be okay because he's not a person. Tommy was cut off by Dream grabbing his chin, forcing him to stare directly into the beady eyes of the mask. Don't finish that fucking sentence, or I swear to God, I'll go tell Sam to demote you to a junior hunter right now. Falling silent, Tommy glared at Dream, trying not to whimper at the pain radiating from his jaw at how tightly Dream was holding it. There was a beat as Dream stared him down, and Tommy met his gaze without flinching. Another beat. Then another. Finally, Dream let go, and Tommy let out a sigh of relief. I don't know where the hell this new attitude of yours came from, but I suggest you get your shit straight sooner rather than later. You're a hunter. You took an oath to protect this city from vampires. Don't forget that. The words, I took an oath to protect innocent people, rang in Tommy's head, but he didn't let himself say it out loud. He had already pushed Dream way more than he should have. Oh shit, yeah, I didn't think about that. God, I love the way this is written. It's really got you sympathizing for vampires. Literal bloodsuckers. But that's because they provide a safe way for them to feed. Sure, not all of them do, but it's not like they ask to be this way. And that's a story that I've heard way too many times in the real world. Not from personal experience, of course, but just from the news. Like, vampires were considered something evil in the early ages because they were. I have personal experience. I'm really sorry about that. No one should have to deal with that. For any reason. Yeah, vampires were... Like, vampires were, like, would be evil, like, back in the day before there was safe ways to store blood. But now that there's a more healthy alternative, like a safer alternative, that some vampires are willing, like, not just willing, but also prefer to do. I guess there could also be, like, Vampire Diaries logic that I've been seeing. Like, I have a feeling that a lot of, like, the rules and stuff about vampires and stuff, and like, hunters, it all kind of reminds me of the Vampire Diaries with how it all is. Except for, in this one, vampires don't burn in the sun, and in the Vampire Diaries, they do. But I'm just seeing some parallels. I'm going off on a tangent here. I should keep going. I'm sorry. He forced out, struggling to make it sound convincing. I've never had to kill one younger than me. fucked me up a bit. It wasn't to lie. She was the youngest he'd killed before, but that wasn't the only reason it had shaken him so badly. Still, it seemed to be the right thing to say, because some of the tension lining Dream's shoulders leaked out. I get that. It can be hard to kill the ones that look like kids, but you just need to remember that they're not human. They can sound like humans, but they're not the same as you and me. The thing is, Dream, they once were. It's not like they were born vampires. You can't just be born a vampire. Because I don't know if Vampire Diaries logic applies to this as well, but in the Vampire Diaries, you cannot get pregnant if you're a vampire. Shit. God, I wish vampires were real. Because if vampires aren't able to get pregnant, that's the best kind of birth control. Sorry. Not the best, but like, with how things with Roe v. Wade are going right now. Yikes. Anyway. Wilbur wasn't like that. If anything, Tommy felt like Wilbur was more human than he was sometimes. Tommy was the hunter who could cut down a vampire in a few swings. Wilbur was just Wilbur. But again, Tommy couldn't say any of that. So instead, he just nodded, dropping his eyes to the ground. Hey, look. I'm sorry for getting pissed, but you need to get a handle on whatever guilt complex you have, because this isn't the last time you're going to need to kill one that looks younger than you. Dream said, his voice much softer than it had been earlier. Yeah, I got it, Tommy mumbled. Reaching out again, Dream gently ruffled his hair. I gotta go fill out a report for tonight. You should go home. You look like you need some sleep. Okay, Dream. With one last hum, Dream dropped the hand from his hair and left the supply room. And just like that, Tommy was alone again. Tommy walked back to his apartment in a haze. Nothing felt real underneath the orange streetlights, with the only thing he could think of being that poor girl he killed. A part of him didn't understand why he was so affected by her. He had killed plenty of vampires before, and none of them had made him react like this. Nothing had made him feel like he was being eaten from the inside out by a carnivorous pit of guilt in his chest. Nothing had made him want to lash out at Dream like he did. I was thinking the same thing. Fanfic. I feel like we as like a community, like the internet as a whole is what I mean, has watered down the meaning for gaslighting to the point where it's become a synonym for lying, and I don't think that's a good thing. But in this scenario, yeah, this is definitely gaslighting. Because when the first time I looked up gaslighting, it, like, the definition was something along the lines of, manipulation by means of emotional damage. Like, trying to get in your head emotionally. A tactic that a lot of parents do. Sorry, I know that this is gaslighting, but what you said just kind of reminded me that, like, the word gaslighting as a whole has been wrongfully misinterpreted over the years. I blame Among Us. Where was I? Arriving at his apartment, Tommy noticed his hands were shaking when he took his keys out of his pocket. He tried to unlock the door, but because of the trembling, the keys slipped through his fingers, and Tommy's breath caught in his throat as the pressure built behind his eyes. It took 2 more attempts for him to unlock the door. As soon as he stepped inside, he heard Wilbur's guitar strumming cut off, followed by a sharp gasp. "Tommy?" Tommy didn't respond to Wilbur as he let the door shut behind him. Instead, he just leaned against the wall, sliding down to the ground and staring at nothing as the vague outline of Wilbur came rushing towards him. "Holy fuck, that's so much blood!" Wilbur exclaimed, kneeling down in front of him. His hands fluttering over Tommy's arms as he searched for an injury. It's not mine," Tommy managed to say, his voice little more than a hoarse whisper. "None of it's mine." Wilbur's shoulders slumped, but he still looked worried as he brought his eyes up to Tommy's face. "So you're not hurt?" Tommy shook his head. He wasn't hurt. He just couldn't find it in him to stand up right then. "Something happened, though," Wilbur then said. It wasn't a question, but Tommy nodded anyway. "What happened?" Wilbur whispered, looking like he wanted to reach out for Tommy, but was holding himself back. Forcing himself to focus on Wilbur's eyes, Tommy tried to find the words to say what happened, to tell Wilbur the horrible thing he'd done. But when he met Wilbur's dark brown gaze, all he could think of was that night he pressed a knife to Wilbur's throat and threatened to kill him. How the blood staining his hands could have been Wilbur's. That was the realization that broke the dam, and Tommy began to sob. She was just a kid," Tommy forced out, hot tears carving tracks into the blood staining his face. "I didn't want to kill her, but Dream was there, and so was Hannah and George, and I didn't have a choice." Grim understanding dawned on Wilbur's face. "Oh, Tommy." And Wilbur didn't sound angry. He didn't sound upset or disgusted or any of the things he should have been feeling knowing that Tommy killed one of his own kind who didn't deserve it. A kid who shouldn't have been caught up in that. Instead, Wilbur reached out, holding Tommy's face in his hands. "It's okay, Tommy," Wilbur reassured him, using his thumbs to wipe the mix of blood and tears off of his cheeks. "You did what you had to. That's okay." Tommy shook his head. "No, I killed her. She didn't deserve to die." "You didn't have a choice, though," Wilbur said gently. "You said it yourself. Dream, Hannah, and George were there. If you didn't do it, one of them would have." And Wilbur was right. Tommy knew he was right. If he had refused to kill her, Dream probably would have done it, and he wouldn't have made it as quick as Tommy did. He wouldn't have cared about her or her pain. He just would have done what he had to do without any guilt or remorse. It still didn't alleviate the crushing pain in his chest. "What's happening to me?" Tommy sobbed. "I'm supposed to be a hunter. I shouldn't feel guilty about this." The hands dropped from his face, and Tommy immediately missed the coolness against his skin. But before he could mourn the loss too much, Wilbur was grabbing him by the shoulders and pulling him into a hug. Tommy tipped forward, wrapping his arms around Wilbur's back and burying his face in his shoulder. He felt Wilbur's chin rest on top of his head and found himself crying even harder. "You're a good person, Tommy," Wilbur whispered. "That's why you feel guilty right now. You were taught not to think of vampires as people, but you do anyway because you're just too damn compassionate." Compassionate? Wilbur had told him he was too compassionate and that others were going to take advantage of that. Maybe he was right. Maybe it wasn't a good thing to be like that. "It hurts so much," Tommy whispered, burying his face into the soft fabric of Wilbur's sweater. "I know, and I'm sorry," Wilbur said, rubbing circles into his back. They stayed like that for, well, Tommy wasn't sure how long it was. It felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes at most. They sat on the floor in front of Tommy's front door, Wilbur holding him close, waiting for his cries to subside as he rubbed circles into his shoulders to calm him down. By the time Tommy stopped crying, he felt hollowed out, empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside of him and left him with a black hole inside his chest. His eyes were puffy, and his head was throbbing with the classic post-cry headache. When he pulled back, Wilbur helped guide him to his feet. Then, he led Tommy to the couch, which Tommy immediately collapsed onto like a rag doll. Laying down on something soft was a balm for the pounding in his skull, and he stretched out, burying his face in the cushions and already wanting to never get up again. He could hear shuffling around the apartment, followed by the sound of running water from the sink. A few minutes later, the couch cushion dipped as Wilbur sat beside his head, and he frowned when he felt Wilbur tap his shoulder. "Tommy, can you open your eyes?" He felt like they were glued shut, so Tommy shook his head. Wilbur sighed. "Come on, I have painkillers for you. I might not get headaches from crying anymore, but I definitely remember what they feel like." Now that got his attention. Eyes flying open, Tommy winced at the flash of pain in his head when he sat up, finding Wilbur holding a glass of water in one hand and 2 small pills in the other. He took the pills and drank a bit of water, before quickly realizing how thirsty he was and downing the rest of it in one go. Then, even though he knew he would have been a lot more comfortable going to his room to lay down, he found himself stretching across the couch again. Wilbur chuckled as Tommy's head brushed the side of his leg. "You gonna sleep here?" "Maybe," Tommy grumbled, letting his eyes flutter shut. "You're still covered in blood," Wilbur pointed out. "Oh yeah." Tommy had stopped noticing the dried blood tugging at his skin, but now that Wilbur had brought his attention back to it, it was all he could feel. "Fuck," Tommy muttered. "I don't want to get up. I'm too tired." There was a moment of silence, and then Wilbur got up from the couch again. Tommy's head was stuffed with cotton at this point, so he didn't question what Wilbur was doing until he settled back down a few minutes later. There was a sound of water dripping from a glass, and then Tommy stiffened when a warm, damp rag was wiped across his cheek. "What are you doing?" Tommy asked, his voice slurring with exhaustion. "The smell was bugging me," Wilbur told him, continuing to wipe the blood off. Tommy snorted, keeping his eyes closed but tilting his chin up a bit to give Wilbur better access to his face. The rag was gentle as it pulled away the dried blood from his skin. The rhythmic motions reminding him of the first time he'd gone on a patrol with Sam. Keep still, Tommy. I need to make sure none of this blood is yours, Sam said gently, running the rag up and down his arms. I told you, it's fucking not. Tommy huffed. Sam sighed, dipping the rag in the bucket again and staining the water pale red. Just let me help, for my own peace of mind. The scowl faded from his face at the softness in Sam's voice, and he found himself slumping against his chair as he stretched his arms out further. Okay, but I want to check your arms after we're done checking mine. A faint smile flickered over Sam's face, glancing at the blood staining his own shirt and arms. Alright, Tommy, you can do that. Tommy imagined what this night would have been like if he hadn't come back to Wilbur in the apartment. If Wilbur had left that first night at the bakery. And Tommy came home covered in blood to no one. There would have been no one to hug him when he cried. No one would have made him wash the blood off his skin. No one would have gotten him painkillers for his headache. He would have had to do it all himself. He could take care of himself. He had done that before, and he could do it again. But having Wilbur here was a relief from something he hadn't even realized he was missing. He hadn't saved the girl, but he had saved Wilbur, and it made his chest ache horribly to imagine a world where he didn't. When his face was clean of blood, Wilbur dipped the rag in water again and handed it to Tommy. Wipe your hands off. Keeping his eyes closed out of sheer stubbornness, Tommy used the cloth to wipe his hands off as best as he could. Once he couldn't feel any more of it on his palms, he held the rag in the air, and Wilbur huffed as he took it back. Does it bother you? Tommy asked, listening as Wilbur dropped the rag back into whatever water container he'd brought over for it. Wilbur paused his movements. Does what bother me? Tommy shrugged, words spilling out from his hazy mind without much thought behind them. Let him out here every night, killing your own kind? It was something Tommy had been wondering for a while, but never wanted to ask for fear of what Wilbur might say. Because even if Wilbur hated what he was, there was no way he could be completely neutral to the fact that Tommy had killed countless vampires. He wasn't a hunter. He didn't grow up with this life like Tommy did. Not to mention, he didn't seem to hate all vampires either. Mostly himself. There was a moment as Wilbur considered his words, and Tommy's heart pounded in his ears. No, it doesn't bother me, Wilbur finally answered. Maybe it should. I know it bothers Nikki, and I think it bothers Jack too, even if he used to be a hunter himself. Tommy flinched at that. While Wilbur knew he was right, he didn't like being reminded of the apprehension he saw in both Nikki and Jack's eyes sometimes when he went to the bakery with Wilbur. You don't have to lie to me. Wilbur made a displeased noise. I'm not lying. Why then? Tommy challenged, finally opening his eyes to look up at Wilbur. I just admitted to you that I killed a 14-year-old girl who was begging me to spare her life. Why doesn't that upset you? Looking down at Tommy to meet his eyes, Wilbur shrugged. You also had a breakdown because of how guilty you felt about it. But I don't usually feel guilty, Tommy argued. I've killed so many vampires before and haven't felt a single thing about it. There was a pause as Wilbur stared at him. Stop trying to convince yourself you're a bad person. That's supposed to be my thing, Wilbur said, cracking a weak smile. Tommy raised an eyebrow. So you admit you're not a monster? We're not talking about me right now, Wilbur diverted, shaking his head. You are not a bad person. It doesn't bother me because I know you, Tommy. I know you don't do what you do out of a place of hatred or malice. Well, I know you didn't hurt whoever you did in the past out of hatred either, Tommy shot back, ignoring the warmth that bloomed in his chest at Wilbur's words. Letting out a deep sigh, Wilbur tilted his head up to the ceiling. Like I said, we're not talking about me, child. I think this conversation is about both of us, Tommy pushed, not wanting to let this go. What I've done doesn't bother you because you know me. Is that what you're saying? Shrugging, Wilbur nodded. I guess so. Same thing applies to you, Tommy said, reaching up to poke Wilbur's side. You're not a monster or a bad person because I know you, and I know you didn't do it for bad reasons. You are so fucking frustrating, Wilbur muttered, dragging his hands down his face. There was no anger in his tone, though. If anything, it sounded like he was trying to hide a smile. And I'm gonna keep being frustrating until you get it through your thick skull that you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. Dropping his hands from his face, Wilbur smiled down at Tommy. And you can't be hard on yourself either. Tommy immediately scowled at this, and Wilbur snorted. Not so fun when it's turned around, huh? Fuck you. Fine, I can practice self-love, bitch. Wilbur barked out a surprised laugh at this. You're gonna practice self-love? Tommy nodded. Yup, I'm the biggest man ever. I'm fantastic in every way. Alright then, Wilbur said, fighting his smile from growing wider. You gotta say it too. The smile dropped. Huh? You gotta compliment yourself, dickhead. Wilbur paused, blinking at him. Is this one of your bits you're not gonna let go until I give in? Yup. Sighing, Wilbur gave Tommy an exasperated look. Fine. I'm a great maid. Immediately, laughter burst from Tommy's chest at that. What? I'm a great maid. I clean your shit up all the time. This place is spotless now because of me. Rolling onto his side, Tommy gasped out peals of laughter. That was not what he meant. That was not the kind of compliment he expected Wilbur to give himself, but by God, it was hilarious. The whole conversation was a bit stupid, but it was exactly what Tommy needed after that day. The laughter didn't get rid of the black hole inside of him, but it helped him to forget it was there for just a moment. His laughter was cut off by his own yawn, and as Tommy settled back in his spot, he was hit with a sudden and sharp wave of exhaustion. Oh, is it past your bedtime, baby man? Tommy scowled, stifling another yawn. I can kick your ass, don't forget. Still doesn't make you any less of a child. While Tommy would normally argue with this, sleep was already creeping its way into his mind. Instead of arguing further, he just lifted a hand to flip Wilbur off and let his eyes shut once more. He nestled further into the cushion, his head barely brushing Wilbur's side as his legs dangled off the end of the couch. Wilbur shifted again, but didn't get up. This time, he readjusted, grunting as he lifted something up into his arms. Tommy almost asked what was going on, but his question was answered when Wilbur began to play more of his guitar. He still didn't sing, but he played a tune that Tommy had heard him humming a few days before. It was slow, sweet, and the more he played, the more Tommy sunk into the couch. The fog in his mind grew thicker, and Tommy felt himself drifting off. His chest still ached. The girl's pleas still echoed in his ears. But for tonight, it was okay. He was okay. I'm getting a bit better at not method acting, but like in the bit where Tommy was like sobbing to Wilbur, I actually started tearing up. I was getting emotional. God. When was the last time I was hugged? Sorry, that's a question for my therapist. Not for Twitch chat. Sorry about that. Alright. I think that is going to be my stream. Who's live? Let's see. Is there anyone to raid? I think I'm just gonna end for tonight. Again, I won't be streaming tomorrow. If I have time, might stream on Monday. Be sure to follow my Twitter to keep update on that, because I'm trying to, I forgot to do it today, but I'm trying to update, like, when I'll be live, on Twitter. So, be sure to keep an eye on that. God, I have not done a stream this late in a while. Alright. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye!